Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for a brand new Film Fanatic show. It's 10:42 on a Tuesday morning, March 3rd. Here we go. Here we go. I just finished up the last movie in the Friday the 13th franchise. I've been the last 2 weeks overdosing on Friday the 13th. I even got into watching, which I reviewed. I think I reviewed three of them, and that I reviewed three. Yeah, it was three movies, three fan made Friday 13th movies, which was a new thing for me. Never Hike Alone, Never Hike Alone 2. Then the third one was Never Hike in the Snow, I think, which was a short. It was all of those movies were put out by Womp Stomp Films. They're all fan made movies. That was a whole new thing for me. I've never really watched, other than seeing a few a few years ago. I saw a few of the fan made movies that were made about the Friday Nightmare on Elm Street films. I I had a pretty weird reaction to those movies. They were I basically I remember watching two or three of those movies, and I didn't make it all the way through. I just felt like the production value wasn't really great. It felt like, I don't know, it just felt really amateurish in a way, and I couldn't get into them. So I kind of just, and I know that that whole the fan made genre is a massive thing. I did really like the first one, Never Hike Alone. I think that is actually really awesome. The second one is okay, but the callbacks killed me. And then the third one, the same thing. I just kind of felt it was really good, but then it was incredibly short, but it just felt like I needed more. I wanted more, and I was like, well, I just felt like it lends itself to something that could or is kind of ridiculous, of where we have fans, rabid loyal fans. Well, and I consider myself to be that person. But does it qualify? If a person who's such a fan decides to get maybe some money together and a couple of cameras, and then they decide to shoot their own fan made movie. You could arguably you can put Jason Voorhees' character in any kind of setting, in any kind of place, any kind of time period. So it just feels like, well, as long as people see Jason Voorhees kill people, that's all that matters. And I could, it could be a thing of like, well, I'm going to set up a couple of cameras and set this movie, the backdrop being in a trailer park, and it's just Jason killing a bunch of people that live in his trailer park for about 10 minutes, and then roll credits. And it's like, okay, just to see him on the screen is the only allure. And I'm like, well, you know, it's kind of borderline. As I almost feel like it's overkill, and it's kind of ridiculous because the movies, again, they're schlocky exploitation movies, but the original films especially, there is a story, there's a structure, there's a narrative, and you need to have that. So regardless of the budget or the technique or lack of technique behind making a film. But anyway, I finished the last movie of Friday 13th, so now I am back to watching just movies in general. It's pretty much been about 2 weeks straight. It all started with going to see Friday 13th Part 3 in the big screen, on the big screen in 3D. That was absolutely amazing. And then a couple of days after that, I was like, man, I gotta go into it deep. So I ended up watching all of the movies again, and I finished up last night with Jason X. So today's show is going to be another deep dive video on Jason X. Again, all of these movies I have done videos on, all things Friday 13th. The deep dive idea was going in that direction, or the idea that I had came up probably about a month or two ago. So trying to present the movies with a deeper dive perspective, obviously, and maybe some more interesting things that in relation to how these movies or how that movie in particular got made. So it's been a lot of fun. I've been learning more. It's made me dive really heavily into the special features aspects on a lot of these movies, which again, I'm all about special features. I always have been. That was one of the big attractions for me when I got into really buying movies, especially in the 90s and when DVDs were the thing. I remember there was a guy who there used to be this band I used to play in called the 220s, quite a few years ago, and we used to when we were starting out, the band had a certain level of success. We were together for quite a few years, but there was a little piece of time kind of in the beginning phases of that band where we were playing locally in town a lot. We played a handful of gigs like in Belfast, and there was a friend of one of the guitar players in that band who we all became pretty good friends with, and he was also a singer. He was really, I remember having conversations with him, and this was like, I don't know, at least 12, 13 years ago. It's crazy. He was really into movies, and he was the first person I ever talked to. Like, at that point, I was buying DVDs. I had, maybe 150 to 100 DVDs in my collection, and I was still buying them, and I was, always, I was way into movies, but I hadn't really, I didn't really go full bore at that point. But I was buying DVDs a lot. And I remember talking to this one guy in particular. He was really into movies, and through him was the first time I ever heard about this new format, Blu-ray. He had just discovered it and started buying a shit ton of Blu-rays, and this was years ago. And within a year or two of that, Blu-rays really blew up, and they were kind of at this point where they people were thinking that this was going to be this new revolution as far as the new tech involving watching movies, and that this was going to replace DVDs. And it reached a point, the Blu-ray industry reached a point of where it was getting really big and popular, but it never really quite got to that point. I don't think it never really replaced DVDs. It never really got to that level. And then fast forward, now I feel like it's been Blu-ray releases have been huge, and Blu-rays are very popular. And I feel like there's like a steady market for it. But when coming out of the age, obviously, of VHS, and then when DVD came out, that was like a monumental like explosion, and that like really replaced the previous technology like completely. Blu-rays, it kind of went to a certain point of where it was going to be that kind of thing, and then it seemed to kind of taper off. And with all of these boutique labels, and I really attribute it to all of the boutique labels that have been putting out all of these incredible movies that, the last 10 years or so, and a little less. A lot of the movies, most of the releases are Blu-ray and 4K now. And I really attribute that fan base and that whole market as where I feel like that's what's kept Blu-ray a thing, and I feel like it's been this sustained thing of popularity and sought out thing, because you can pretty much buy or find virtually any movie that you can think of on Blu-ray. The next thing now is 4K. There's another thing that's coming out, I think, at some point, probably another tech version of how we could watch movies. 4K came out very, very big. That was also very, very huge. But it's been, I don't know, kind of like at this equal level to some degree. It seems people that are really hardcore are the ones who are buying 4K, but those people, there's enough of, I think, of a market for that it's able to sustain, but it's not, it's clearly not like what, and even with Blu-ray, not like when DVDs first came out. Because I remember when DVDs came out, I was like beside myself. I remember when DVDs came out, like where, seeing movies on cable, seeing movies on VHS or what have you, and then when DVDs came out, I was just like, oh my god, like just being blown away by the quality of the picture, the sound, and then the other thing that was just completely crazy was, and it was, I really feel like when DVDs came out, it had this revolutionary thing where movies that you loved, you could find out, and there'd be, find out all these details through watching these special feature components on a lot of these movies, on how these movies were made, interviews with the director, and all kinds of things, documentaries, and it was like, wow, it was like this. It was kind of unbelievable. It was kind of like, I remember a feeling of like when I first discovered YouTube, where musicians that I loved, or drummers that I loved, like suddenly I can hear and see interviews with them and see them do clinics, and it was like mind blowing. Since then, it hasn't really ever, nothing's really ever taken off to that degree, but all three are still around. The DVD is still a thing. It's obviously the market is smaller, but anyway, again, all these movies I've talked about, but this is the the newer series, the deep dive series. I have done about, the last movie I did a deep dive series. It's all been Friday 13th, all day, all night here at Film Fanatic headquarters. So every movie I've been talking about as of late has been Friday 13th. But they were all the newer videos I've been posting have been all deep dive videos. So, and then after I'm finishing up here with that, I'll go back to my other reviews. I still have a lot of movies to review. Before I get into this, where I'm going to be talking about, this will be a deep dive video on Jason X. I have a DVD version of it. I've had this for years, for a really long time actually. 2 weeks ago, how this whole thing started, and it probably won't start again. Who knows? But 2 weeks ago, I went to Black Bear Cinema in Orono and just had an amazing experience. Probably easily my favorite film going experience in recent time. But went to go see Friday 13th Part 3 in 3D, and it was such a goddamn good time. And the theater there, they're going all in. They're showing every Friday the 13th movie. After the movie, we were talking to kind of the manager there at Black Bear Cinema, and he said, yeah, what they're doing, their plan was to show every Friday the 13th movie in the series on Friday the 13th, which I was like, that's amazing. Like, does life could not get any better. So not this Friday, but the following Friday, which will be a Friday the 13th, they're going to be showing chapter 4, the final chapter. I looked it up, and I knew that was a thing, and I was like, okay, I got to keep this on my radar, because obviously the movies, when they're going to do every film, or eventually try to show every film on the 13th, on the Friday 13th, obviously there's going to be a pretty big gap of time, and planning wise or scheduling it, putting it in your calendar is pretty easy, because there's a lot of time, so you can plan on it. If you need to, change something in your stupid schedule. So I knew about this, after talking to the manager, and then the other night, I think it was last night or the night before, I looked it up. I went to check their schedule at Black Bear Cinema, and I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, I am totally going. So not this Friday, the Friday after, they're going to be showing the final chapter, which I am so stoked to see. So yeah, that's going to be amazing. The Because I was just blown away by how great the quality of the movie was. Seeing, and again, I don't really like 3D at all, but the 3D was fucking outrageous. The sound system in this theater is so fantastic. The only other time, this was my second time going to Black Bear Cinema. The only other time I went there, which was last winter, I went with some friends to see Christopher Nolan's more or less restored version of Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, which was absolutely one of the greatest film going experiences I had ever had. I was just blown away. I mean, just mesmerized. So this theater is kick ass. It's a little bit of a hike. It's an hour. Orono is it's in the college. Orono is there's the big college is there, so there's a lot of college kids. That was the other thing I was so surprised about, and it was like inspiring. I left the theater inspired and just like excited because there were so many young kids there. There were a lot of college kids, maybe even younger, that were totally into the movie. They knew the lines, everything. They had obviously seen the movie many times before. And it was just great. People were just having a great fucking time interacting with the movie, laughing, screaming. People were like, there were some people in the back that were doing kind of the mystery science theater thing, and they were making these like really hilarious kind of commentary things, while the movie was going. And it wasn't like annoying. It was awesome because it was all about the movie experience, like all the shit that they were saying. Like we were sitting in the middle, and there was like a group of these like young guys, probably, 18 to 23 or something. They were sitting kind of right behind us, and these guys were fucking hilarious. And they weren't talking, over everything and constantly, but every now and then they'd start talking about, a certain scene would come up, and I could tell that these guys had definitely, these were young kids, but they had seen this movie, quite a few times because they knew what was happening, and they were just like talking over it and enough to where we could hear it, and it was fucking hilarious because they were really funny, and it was like totally like this mystery science theater thing. But to me, it's like, people complain about going to the movies all the time about, well, people talk, about, they'll like talk with their friends about bullshit, or they'll be on their fucking phone, or whatever. And I don't really see that. I mean, I go to the movies a lot more. It's been a little bit of a lull lately, other than Friday the 13th. So I'm hoping to get going back to the theater more. I mean, I will see Friday, the final chapter, but and I get that. But a lot of the times most of the times I go to the movies, I don't see people that are annoying me or hear that. I mean, I don't see people staring into their phones. I don't see people talking about the fight that they had with their stupid girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, or talking about whatever. This was different because these guys were talking and everybody was very vocal, but it was about the movie. It was all about that and kind of the shit that was going on the big screen. And that's great because, at one point, that was how films were. People would, interact with the movie, especially in the exploitation world, the grindhouse times. And I remember even, growing up as a kid going to the movies, and again, I was too young to go and experience the grindhouse cinema decade, but I remember just as a kid going to the movies as a kid, where we would go out fairly often. My mom and dad, we lived grew up in New York, and there was a theater, a movie theater that was probably 25 minutes, half hour away from our house. There was a couple of big giant movie, complexes, and we would go as a family to the movies. And it was always this whole big outing. Like I remember going to the movies so vividly as a kid. We would go as a family, like on a Saturday night. Every time we would go out, the theater would be packed with people. There'd be kids, families, the whole family would go. I remember having experience of, being a real little kid and going to see Tim Burton's Batman. And just like that whole thing of like the theater being packed. And I was really, really young when that came out, but I remember just being so enamored with the excitement and the electricity in the air of this movie. And people were like into it. And people would react to the chills and thrills that the film would cause, so it was like interactive. And I remember that always being a thing of going to the movies. And then I remember we got into this tradition where we would go out to Friendlies for ice cream or big giant ice cream sundaes or whatever after the movie, or get a late dinner or something, and then come home. And it was like that was the whole Saturday, a whole Saturday night. And it was so much fun. And I really enjoy going to the movies now, going to see new releases or what have you. But that, I have to say, that magic, that spark, a lot of the times is not there. The experience itself is for me, but the climate is so different now. Unfortunately, a lot of the times we go to the theater, there's like fucking five other people there. It's and I know nothing lasts forever, but it is in some ways a very, very different experience. There have been occasions, has been times of where I've gone to the movies and I've gotten that feeling of where like, wow, okay, this is what it felt like to see a movie when I was like 14 years old, where it was like really exciting. Like the feeling you get when you go to, like you're going to go to a concert to see a band that you really love. That kind of thing. So it's still there and it's still a part. And my immediate experience is still the same. And that's still there regardless of whether the theater is packed or it's empty. I still have that feeling. But anyway, so I'm really excited about going to see the final chapter. It's a toss-up. Goes to Hell. Every time I watch that movie, I'm like, this movie fucking rules. This is the greatest movie in the franchise. But then I always go back to the final chapter as being my favorite. So it's a toss-up. It's a toss-up. Both movies are amazing. They're both very, very different from each other, too, which is great. So today's movie is on a movie I honestly, when I first saw it, I was not a huge fan. When I remember back in the day when Jason Takes Manhattan had come out, and also Jason X, I was not really a big fan of these movies, in all honesty. The only movie I have seen that I got to see in the theater as a kid was uh part 5. That was the only, no, was it part 5? Part 6. Jason Lives. I think that's it. Jason Lives was the only movie I remember seeing in the theater. It was the only Friday I saw in the theater, which is really surprising. But years and years later, when Jason Takes Manhattan, I was like, oh, I don't know, they don't look. My reaction was, oh man, these movies look really shitty, like really shitty. Not in a good, fun way, but. And I always thought they looked just, I don't know, as big of as a fan as I was growing up, I always thought these movies looked just really bad, but not in a cool way. And I remember watching them on VHS or even DVD, and never, didn't get a chance to see them in the theater, and wasn't really a big fan. I just kind of thought these movies were, just, they didn't really deliver the goods. They were nothing for me, they didn't have the same magic that the original series had. But fast forward now, both of those movies I fucking love. I love both of them. I love every fucking movie in the Friday the 13th series, everything that's connected to it. Jason Takes Manhattan has grown on me tremendously, tremendously. I've always been like even with Kane Hodder, I've always liked him. I mean, he's a great stuntman, great actor, and he's been in some killer movies. But I've never been a huge Kane Hodder fan, I guess, as Jason. I always like I'm a Ted White guy. Final Chapter, Richard Broker too. But over the years, Kane Hodder has really grown into being one of my favorites, and I actually really love his portrayals as Jason now. I mean, Jason Goes to Hell is arguably the best movie, and he is Jason Voorhees in that movie. So Jason Takes Manhattan has grown for me immensely, and I absolutely love that movie now. It's got some of the great classic scenes. It's got one of the best iconic kills ever. The boxing scene, the beheading. Not the beheading, but through Jason punching this kid's head off. It's just the most outrageous thing. But Jason Takes Manhattan has grown on me immensely, and so has this Jason X. I again, the same thing happened. I was like, this movie initially when I first saw it and it came out, I'm like, this movie kind of sucks and it's kind of trash and not good trash. Because I love me some trash, and I was like, this movie's just kind of bad. But it has grown on me so much, and I absolutely adore this movie now. I think this movie is fucking wild. I think this movie is so. I think it's so underrated. It is. In the franchise as a whole, in the Friday the 13th universe, I think this one is one of the most original films. It really swings for the fences. It really does take some chances, takes some risks. It takes the Jason Voorhees character and also the lore of some of the history and mythology of Friday the 13th and puts it in a completely different environment, which on paper, again, like when I was a kid when this movie came out, I'm like, what? That's just ridiculous. What? Jason in space? What the hell is that? And now watching it, I finished watching this last night. I'm like, this movie just completely kicks ass. I got this DVD version long time ago. I've had this, I can't remember where I got it. Probably at least 10 years ago. I have all of the movies in the series, but I need to get upgrades on Blu-ray for Jason Goes to Hell, and I definitely want to get an upgrade for Jason X. But for the most part, most of the movies that I have, and also I definitely need to get an upgrade for Freddy vs. Jason. So I absolutely love this movie, though. I think it's actually got a ton of special features. This DVD is actually really good. The quality's okay. It's like mid-range quality DVD. But there's a lot of cool special features in here. And there's a lot of interviews, even with Sean Cunningham, which is really great. And his son also produced this movie. Sean Cunningham has worked, on many films. He's directed, some amazing films, obviously Friday. He's also produced numerous films. He's had a long partnership with his son. Even Sean Cunningham's wife has been involved with writing on some of the movies that he's worked on, like producing, and I think maybe even directing. And there's some really cool interviews with Sean Cunningham on this disc. He's kind of a guy who doesn't really give many interviews. He's pretty private. Sean Cunningham is. He's doesn't, as far as I know, when it comes to all of the conventions and how hugely popular the Friday the 13th series is. As far as I know, like Sean Cunningham never really does conventions. He's not a convention kind of guy. I think he might have early on, but as far as I know, it's usually like when you go to these conventions, or at least when I see these conventions around the country, it's usually the cast and some of the maybe the producer, or well, not even the producer, but most of the time it's the cast that you see. I went to my first horror convention last year, and Kane Hodder was there, but I did not go to the signing, but I could see him. It was pretty wild. We went to this convention. It was last year, or maybe 2 years ago, up in Bangor, at the big Bangor Pavilion. It's the big arena up there. They had one part of it was over at the, which used to be a mall. It's technically still a mall, but it was kind of broken up where they had one part of it was at the big Prudential Center, the big kind of arena, and then the other part was at this big giant space in the mall. And you had to have tickets. We had tickets to go to the, the Prudential Center. But obviously to do, the book signing and all that other stuff, to get autographs, you needed to get a ticket for that. But you were allowed to like walk around, just walk around through the mall and see all the shit. But if you wanted to do any of the events or participate, you obviously had to pay. And we didn't pay for that part. But I remember we walked all around, and that was pretty cool. There was tons of people there, all kinds of people dressed up, and the whole cosplay thing. It was like walking in, like if you're out trick or treating on Halloween night on a street that it's just packed with kids and people trick or treating. That's what it felt like walking through this building. But Kane Hodder was at this one doing autographs, and there was somebody else who was big. I can't remember who it was, and we didn't get tickets to it to go to, because it was kind of expensive. So we didn't go, but I could see him, and it was wild because he was in this back room, this big giant room, and there was a fucking line. Like there must have been 400 or 500 people. Like it was insane. He was way in the back room at this table, and I could see him. And there was a line that was like easily 400 people deep. And then there was still like, even before right after the line had really kind of what started, there was this mass group of people waiting to get in there. And I was just like, holy shit, man. It was rock. He's a rock star. I mean, it was wild. And he was, signing people's autographs and meeting people. And it was, I don't know, it was fairly expensive to get a ticket for that part, but super cool, like, and wild to see in person. I mean, he's an icon and in the horror world, but it's amazing to see. Like I've always known the Friday 13th franchise is immensely popular. It's pretty much, I think, the most popular horror franchise even to this day. But to see it in person and to see the amount of people into it was like, holy shit, this is wild, it was pretty intense. It was pretty amazing, actually, kind of inspiring. But Jason X came out in 2001. I remember my first, well, again, I didn't really like it that much, but I saw it on DVD or something around that time, and I was like, it's okay. I kind of felt like. And again, the Friday 13th movies are all. I consider every movie in the franchise. I consider all of these. I mean, first and foremost, slasher movies. They are all slasher movies without a doubt. One of my favorite YouTube guys, Pizzowell, who is just awesome. He is a next level Friday 13th fanatic. Like he is insane on how much he knows about the franchise and how much he loves it. But he's got such an awesome channel. He covers all kinds of horror movies, but his big thing is a lot of low budget exploitation movies in the horror genre, which I really love. But he's great. He's really really great. I think he's definitely one of my favorite YouTube guys. He's got a really cool like way about how he'll talk about movies for the most part, like even movies that he isn't really into. He's got a cool way of reviewing movies. He has his brother on on the channel a lot, which is great, super awesome. So and he does some really great interviews too. I've seen some really good interviews. But he was talking about one video that he had posted. I think it was maybe last year or two. Might have been like 2 years ago. He's done a lot of videos on Friday 13th. Really like heavy duty. So and he was talking about movies in the franchise, and he was talking about part four, the final chapter being like the definitive quintessential, like the perfect slasher movie. And I'm like, yeah, that's totally like as spot on as it can be. But the whole franchise, including Jason X, like the entire franchise, all of the movies in the Friday the 13th universe, I think first and foremost, even though they go and some of them go in radically different directions, and they're very and some of them are really different, which I love, which I think is great, and I think it is something that people don't really something that people don't give the credit that the franchise I think is due, because some people on the outside just say, well, it's just they're all just like every movie is just kids kids getting slaughtered at a camp, and it's just just gratuitous sex, gratuitous violence, and it's like, yeah, that's part of it, a big part of it, and that's one of the reasons I love it. And that every movie is kind of the same, and but realistically, when you get down to the nitty gritty and check out these movies, and I watch these movies every year, the I'm always kind of taken aback. I'm always taken aback by how different some of these movies really, really are from each other, and they really did kind of push the envelope and try to give it a fresh start. Everything from Jason Goes to Hell to Jason X, especially. And some people would say, well, maybe they might say, well, it wasn't very successful, but at least they tried. I think that's the case with Halloween Ends. Not everything was successful in that movie, but they were definitely trying something new, and I actually really like that movie a lot. And the same thing with another, probably the best in the Halloween franchise, Season of the Witch, like doing something radically different. But I think the Friday franchise doesn't get enough credit, because I do think creatively, artistically, if you will, a lot of these films were, and the various, the some of the different teams, some of the different directors really did try to shake things up, and I think they were successful. I mean, when you look at Friday the 13th, the final chapter or part two, and then you look at a new beginning or a new blood or something, or Jason Takes Manhattan, they're radically different from each other. Like they really are, and I think that's really cool. And I think that the franchise as a whole doesn't get the credit that it deserves for maybe taking for some of the risks that I think, as for what it is, taking some of the risks that they have taken. Even I think with the last movie that came out in 2009, where they did something unique and I think pretty different for the story and the whole world, which is pretty, I don't know, I think that's pretty commendable in my book, because there's a lot of fucking movies. So and Jason X, again, I wasn't really super hot for this movie when it came out, but now I I totally fucking love. I This is one of the movies in the franchise in the Friday 13th franchise that I just love more and more. The two movies that happens the most for me is Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X. Every time I watch either of these movies, I'm like, God damn, this movie rocks. God damn, this movie rocks. And that's been the case with Jason X. Now, I can safely say I think that this movie is totally kick ass. I absolutely love this movie. All of the bad, kind of shitty aspects of this movie, I think it's perfectly. I think it totally works in that whole kind of thing of it's so bad, it's good. Like this movie really is an example of that because the movie has like some really cheesy flaws, some really bad production aspects to it, but ultimately I think because it is so bad, it's fantastic. Um, the other thing too that's really funny is this movie came out a few years after The Matrix, so it definitely has. Well, like what I started to say, every movie in the Friday 13th movie franchise world is a slasher first and foremost. And the other aspect is I think they're all full on exploitation movies. And I think that this is an example of where they definitely tried to play up the Matrix thing because, Matrix had come out a few years prior. This came out in 2001. Matrix came out in 98, which is fucking crazy. So it's wild. I definitely see the Matrix influence in this, but and the thing that's funny about this movie, which can be bad or good, but I think it's actually great, is that again this came out in 2001, and when I think of like when I watch the original series, this movie seems more dated, and I think the reason is because of there's a lot of computer generated graphics in this movie, right before or right as more or less CGI was emerging. And but yet the budget is this movie feels like it has this big scale to it, but yet it was super low budget and it's got all of these kinds of some of it looks really good, like the I mean because the movie takes place in space. It's Jason in space. So it's I like the blending of the science fiction element with the horror slasher element. I think that's really really cool. But this was right on the cusp, right as the emergence of CGI and the coming out of the late '90s, where suddenly it was like this new technology. So a lot of movies were using it a lot, even though the technology wasn't quite there yet. And there's moments visually where the movie looks really, really great, and it does have this kind of big budget feel. But then it also feels like, man, it feels like this movie was shot, for like very little money, and the computer graphics were just like that they were using at the time looks really shitty. So it kind of like goes back and forth for me. But ultimately, I think it even the bad aspects of the kind of computer graphics, they're so terrible, but they're so good. I would love to again. This transfer is okay, or I should say it's good. It's definitely pretty good. I mean, I've had this version for a wicked long time. So, which is great, but I would imagine seeing this movie, seeing Jason X on Blu-ray would be, would probably melt my brain. It would probably just be absolutely incredible. I have seen reviews for both Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X. I actually on Pizza Wells' channel. I've seen two separate reviews of those films being or 4K releases. I've never seen them on Blu-ray, which would be fucking wild. So I definitely want to get them because I know that would probably change quite a bit as far as how I feel about the computer graphics. But nevertheless, I think this movie has some really wild and bold ideas around Jason Voorhees' character and with the story and the way they use the technology, virtual reality, the science fiction element for this film. Some of the ideas that they do and are really awesome. The kills in this movie are fucking badass. Like they're really really good. I don't think Jason X has gotten a big, I think has gotten over the years a lot more respect for it. Same thing goes for Jason Goes to Hell, which that movie became kind of a cult phenomenon, like its own thing. But at the time, I don't think it was, and I think the same thing has happened for Jason X, where I really think it's a really great film, and for what it is. And I feel like over the years, like a lot of great movies, a lot of great exploitation movies over the years, it's definitely found its audience, it's found its found a niche, and I think there's a group of really rabid hardcore fans like myself that think that this movie is actually just killer. And I think that's totally the case with Jason X. And I have many examples of this situation where so many times movies grow on me over time. Certain films that I've seen, once I get maybe to the fifth time or fourth time, sixth time, 10th time, I, by that point I'm like, if I always, at that beforehand thought that movie was okay, it's pretty good, it's pretty decent, and then I'm like, holy shit, this movie is amazing. This is an example of that, where each time I watch it, I enjoy it more and more, and I definitely want to get a Blu-ray version of it because, I think my perspective on the tech or the computer graphics would be phenomenal. One of the this movie came out. One movie I think that came out that kind of suffered because of the really bad graphics. Even though I kind of like the movie, I think some of the graphics are just really awful, worse than Jason X. But Pitch Black with Vin Diesel. That movie was all about the embracing the tech at the time, and the tech wasn't really ready, and the tech looks really, really shitty. The cheesy computer graphics, like really bad. So and I think it does get in the way of enjoying the movie. But with Jason X, in the context of it being an exploitation movie and slasher movie, I think it totally fucking works. So, and it's really fun. I think it's a really fun movie. Kane Hodder, of course, knocks it out of the park. David Cronenberg is in this film very briefly and gets killed, and he's amazing in this movie. Love me some David Cronenberg. It's got a really great cast. Lexi Doig, Todd Farmer, Lisa Ryder's really great in this. She plays a like a robot basically. She's pretty badass. I'm a huge fan of hers. She's been in a lot of movies over the years. Andromeda, which was a television show. Jason X, of course. Forever Night, which was another television show, I believe. Secret Lives, the story of Luke. The Secrets of Eden. She's always been kind of a favorite of mine. Peter Mensa is really very cool in this movie as well. I've seen him in quite a few films over the years. He was in The Scorpion King. He was in 300, Spartacus, Gods of the Arena, Midnight Texas, which was a television show, Snake Eyes. Yeah, he's been in some great movies, and he's always been a good character actor. Tears of the Sun with Bruce Willis. Yeah, very cool. Very cool cast. I don't think it gets. I don't think the cast. I don't think this movie gets the credit it really deserves. And it was directed by James Isaac, who I honestly don't know if I've seen any of his films. He did Skinwalkers in 2006, Jason X, of course, in 2001. Pig Hunt 2009, House 2, The Many Lives of Jason. There were two documentaries about the Friday the 13th films that he was pretty involved in. But yeah, great. He did a fantastic job as a director with this movie. I just really, the special features are really great on here, and I think it was successful. I think they were really trying to do something that was truly a standalone film, try to take some risks, take some creative chances, and I think they nailed it. In this cheesy exploitation way. Yeah, it's a super fucking fun ride, and it's highly original. It's highly original. It's got some really fucking great kills. I think, to a degree, some of the best kills in the series. So, thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Peace.